other zone, the other states can take an aspect where they will have excellence so that you will be known for what you have brought to the table. So that is what I would want to say before I go to what I speak. And the topic is the role of permanent secretaries in the changing political dynamics, past, present, and the future. And I'm glad that our former governor is here. Past in those years is certainly better than the service that we have today. You may not agree, but those who were there at the time, they were the ones who took the decisions. They were conscientious, they had a sense of purpose, and you could rely on whatever advice they gave to you. But that is not to say that today we do not have good civil servants. But when I go to the paper, I don't read from the screen. I have the paper, but what I have will be projected on the screen. So I have an outline of the history of the civil service. Then I will talk about a brief history of the role of commissioners and permanent secretaries. And then why we need reforms. Then I will talk about the reforms in the federal service from 1999, why I have been invited, expected of permanent secretaries in assisting the political heads. And then how do we prepare for the future? And then we come to a conclusion. Now, I will start by saying, in my paper, I have made certain basic assumptions. And I want to state this. I want to believe that everyone here is very familiar with the public service rules as they have been adopted by the different states. I also want to believe that we're also very familiar with the provision of the financial regulation. I also believe that we are conversant with certain aspects of the Constitution as it relates to our mandates. If we know that, then I am good to go. We know that there are three arms or three branches of government, but where the permanent secretaries and the commissioners play is in the executive. We also know that in a democratic governance model, it is the executive that brings out policies, implement policies to ensure that what today we call dividends of democracy get to the people. So this is where the permanent secretary of the civil service itself becomes very important. What the topic says, the past, the present, and the future. What I will do, I will not dwell so much on the past, but I'll just rattle through. But when it comes to question and answer, I'll be ready to take. We do know that in the colonial administration, beginning from the colonial times, that's when we were still under British rule before the independence. Of course, when they were there, what were they doing? They were actually working to serve the interests of the imperialist government. At that time, some Nigerians were definitely appointed, but they did not want to give senior positions to Nigerians because they believed, they had this propaganda that Africans were not able to hold high public offices. But starting in the 40s, there was a nationalistic movement at the time pushing for high-level Nigerians to occupy the senior offices in the civil service. It actually happened, And that was because they wanted some reforms to go with the local government system, which was the native authority. And even at that time, they realized that in bringing them in, inclusiveness was very important. And when they brought them in, of course, some level of development came up. And that was when we had the first welfare development plan for Active. But since then, the service has grown. There have been a lot of development. There have been a lot of innovations and teachings. Okay. Now, I'll go to the outline there. Now, starting from 1954, the Macpherson Constitution was actually in 1952, but it did not come into force until 1954. So that was when it was actually pushing for a true federation. So that was when we then had the federal and the regional civil service system. But these civil servants were loyal to their different regions, but they did work. And after that, of course, we moved on to 1963, when, of course, it was independent was in 1960. But it was the 1963 Constitution which gave the minister as the chief executive of the ministries, and the permanent secretary was the accounting officer. Even at that time, 1979, if you look at the 1979 Constitution, that's the one that they changed what the 1963 Constitution did by giving to a single person the authority to both be the chief executive and also to be the accounting officer. So that was when we had the era of the very powerful ministers, as we call that. Then, of course, in 1979, we had the Decree 42. That changed the name of permanent secretaries to Director General, making the permanent secretaries, if you like, as deputy chief executives. I won't say more about the past. If you want to ask questions, you can. Now, the real question here is, the permanent secretaries, what is their role? The permanent secretary's office has gone through many administrative adjustments in history. The permanent secretary needs to be very well qualified to be able to carry out its mandate. One may ask, what is the role of the head of service? The truth is, the head of service must have been a permanent secretary. And therefore, it is important that whatever you are doing, because very often you may have a challenge with your political head, provided you feed in your your head of service into all of this, then of course you are able to stand firm. Provided, of course, you yourself as permanent secretary is doing what is right. So I may not give specific examples that I had to intervene in. Maybe I will go on and so, now where did this issue of permanent, the name permanent in permanent secretary come from? The truth of the matter is, if the British had a better avenue to run government, perhaps there would have been no civil service. So the issue of permanence actually came from the British setup, because we believe that the civil service is elastic and it is an essential component of government. So, like previous speaker, he's spoken very well about the civil service, and I can tell you that without the civil service, that is the engine of government, most governments will collapse. Now, the history of the public service in the British state started with the Midwest state as a region. But for the other states, it started when it became states. So we know that under the Midwest region, we had our first premier as Chief Dennis Usadebe. But since then, many adjustments have been made. Now, the guidelines that have been set up in current regulations guiding how the permanent secretaries, the commissioners, is the same. And I think we should all take a view that we could also be working at the federal level. So as I speak, it is not necessarily related to you as permanent secretaries in the state or heads of service in the state. Because at some point, I will have to talk about certain issues that will come up in a changing political dynamics and talk about how we can address those things. Now, the commissioner or minister in the advocacy committee in the federal will represent the state in cabinet meetings, will take policies to the executive council, but they would have been imputed by the permanent secretary. That is why the civil service remains the engine of government. If you are not competent as permanent secretary, you cannot really lead your workforce. So it is very important that you are up to date. I will talk about training as we go along. Now, for the commissioners, like I said, till today they remain the chief executive of ministries, while the permanent secretaries, they are the highest ranking officers in the ministry in terms of administration. The minister is the political head, but he has no such powers. Just like Dr. Abba said, for as long as the permanent secretary is alive, even after retirement, you can be called to answer. That is why you must not bend the rules. You must not bend the rules. You must know the rules. Now, in terms of, again, we have what the permanent secretary should also do. It's there in the paper, so I will not waste time, but the day-to-day activity in the ministry is managed by the permanent secretary. You have to ensure that the instruments that we use for ensuring that development or dividends of democracy gets to the people is the budget. The question is, how is the budget or the content of the budget drawn up? What did you do? What did you tell your minister? How did you defend it before the budget office? Is it open? Is there a citizens' participation? These are key. But I guess in coming to going forward, these are some of the things that we will. So the existing regulations as it is, you find that, all right, let's take a look. Now, The individuals that occupy these two positions, as Pam said, Minister or Commissioner, the rules are very clear. They are interdependent. They should work together. Therefore, what do we expect if they work together? You find that if they work together, the benefit will be for the system. But very often, you have some altercations. How do we address that? So I have said in this paper that the anticipated dynamics between the two individuals should normally be that of applicable delineation and differentiation, because both offices know what your mandates are. But if you have character, if you have capacity, and you have no self-interest, there should be no problem. But where there is a command, then there is a problem. So all of us need to be above board in whatever we are doing. Now, in terms of ensuring that we do the right things, the commissioner, the permanent secretary, you are very key. Because if you don't, then of course the citizens that you are there to provide for will not get the benefits. So it is important that there will be proper communication, and if the citizens see you as doing what is believed to be what we want, then you are good. But the question is, in doing all of this, have you engaged or do you have a mechanism knowing what the citizens want? I don't know. So you ask yourselves. Because you cannot be just doing what you think they want when what they want is not what you're delivering. I think we want to do that. Now, I did say you should know the provisions of the Constitution as it relates to your mandate. And that is why I talked about, in my, I think, bullet 3, where I said the primary source of policies is often the Constitution, because that is where you get the fundamental objectives in which the principle of state policy, they are where they provide. Of course, for the party that is in place, they have a manifesto, but the government that may come in may not be of the previous party. And permanent secretaries are supposed to be apolitical. Remember, there was a time we had the military, and the military had allies in permanent secretaries because they didn't have confidence in the politicians. At one point, there were no civilian commissioners in the military. But I think it was in 1976 when they were brought in. But even at that time, there was still no confidence in them. And that was at the time you had what you call a super permanent secretary, because they actually took charge. We won't talk about the approving decision, whether what they did at the time was right or wrong. However, so how has the service fared? When the military came in, it is known that the military that came in, years at the time, confidence was lost. There was no more satisfaction within the civil service. But even as they brought in even civilians, they were still not large. They just wanted a situation where they would go away. However, the military left many years ago, and we are still complaining. So what has gone on? You should then question ourselves. So like I said, over time, reforms have taken place. But I would now say this, that in 1999, of course, there was the Georgie also reform. Let me talk about the most current. I think it was in 1999, in my view, that within the federal service, like government really underscored its willingness to reform the Federal Civil Service. And that was when many permanent secretaries that were considered unfit were disengaged. And we go into details. That happened. One of them was returned to be a director. And then what happened? When we came into the democratic setup in 1999, the civil service had a very bad reputation. In fact, virtually all ministers lambasted civil servants as not being competent. But do you really blame them? You didn't give them work to do. You have politicized the top hierarchy of the civil service. And filling those offices, it wasn't based on merit. That was the time you had okay. If you look at that's slide 13. One of the first block is a politicization of the top hierarchy of the civil service. What that disengagement did was to remove those people. And that is what was it supposed to achieve? It was equitization. For those who are in the finance world, it's not the meaning of the equity when you are sharing portfolios. This one is about bringing equity in distribution to the positions as permanent secretary and so on. So what did that administration do at that time? Professor Adedeji of blessed memory gave a 2 weeks training, and all the then 7 permanent secretaries participated. And all of those who didn't do well were asked to go. And those who came tops, one was taken from each state, and they became the permanent secretaries representing those states. And the person who came tops became the head of the civil service. That was merit-based. It is from there we now started having every state being represented by council. After that, the zone now also had one to represent the zone. So that is the first. And then the impression they said some segments of the service had about the public service was very bad. It is true that there was general lack of financial accountability and quality. I won't deny that. There was disregard for rules and regulations. And then there was, of course, the general decline in efficiency and effectiveness. At that time, too, there were external realities that faced virtually all nations of the world. It was globalization, it was democracy, with increasing pressures on the public service. So if you were not doing well, how were you going to react to this coming from example? But then the public service actually believed we were doing well, but that we were deceiving ourselves. So that blood division of all of us in there. So a study was carried out by the Office of the Head of Service. Let me say that I wasn't head of service at the time, so that nobody would think that the credit is coming to me. And I must say here that even before I became head of service in 2009, significant progress had been made. But I must admit, we are not well wished. But the report that came out, the outcome of that study, showed that the Federal Civil Service was aging, which is true. People were marking time. People had changed documents in their files, but it is true. And there was a preponderance of unskilled staff. So how could you deliver when you say you are the engine to serve the government? Morale was very, very low. The working environment, of course, was nothing to write home about, far from being ideal. Now, professionalism and esprit de corps was those relegated to the background. We needed to bring in more transparency in the activities that we were doing. So, in 1999, I was principal secretary to the president at the time. I came from the public sector, from the private sector. I was a partner in KPMG. And I had been in the Ministry of Finance from 1996, because at the time, the then minister said he wanted a chartered accountant to come in to assist. So I was actually invited. So I got in there. In 99, I was actually going to go back. Someone had come through my office. His papers passed through my file and through my table. And then he came back at some point. And I said, well, I am actually leaving. What does that mean? He said, I am leaving to go to where I came from. I said, tell me. And he said to me, no, then I see you are not one of them, whatever that meant. So that was how he requested me to see the then president-elect. I never knew the president-elect before that time. Of course, I went to see him. I didn't even know he was interviewing me. But he asked me to do a few things, which I did. And then I said I was leaving. He made me an essay. I didn't accept it. And I said, whatever you wanted me to do, I will do. Then he said, you will be my PS. PS, I didn't know what PS meant. Anyway, that was how I became the principal secretary. And then, of course, like I said earlier, the service had a very bad reputation. But then I had been in service from 1995 to that time. So I knew a few things. But then I didn't know the rules because I was wondering. Anyway, so anyway, a committee was then set up and to review. Okay, someone had, it was the last speaker who was saying some people in the departments and agencies will say the public service rules don't belong. And that's not correct. Remember that what we had before was civil service rules. It was changed to public service rules to capture them. Now, if there was anything in the public service rules which contradict the law setting you up, if you wanted to, then you had to go and amend it. So that was how tenure policy was implemented in parastatals. Anyway, so I thought I should just mention that. So when I was made to chair that committee that reviewed the public service rules and the financial regulations, because I was aware that morale was already low, that was the first time the 8-year at terminal level was brought in, but the president didn't accept it. So what about it? I said, well, if I have to come back, you can bring me on contract. But it was not approved. But as Providence will have it, Yar'Adua came into office. I was still principal secretary for a few months when he said, I need you to go to Ministry of Finance to reform the budget. But then I didn't stay long as PAMSEC Finance before I was made head of the civil service. Okay, so that is where I will now start my story. As I came in, of course, for me, I like teamwork. So as a permanent secretary, you have to know your work first. So becoming the head of the civil service, because I had a team as well, I knew that in the reform we wanted to do, many people didn't like the suggestions. We then decided that, you know what, let's even have a town hall meeting where we will invite all the directorate cadre to hear their views. I remember one of my colleagues, Pamsek, said to me, Steve, you want to do this? You're shooting yourself. I said, no, I have nothing to hide. And when we started, I said, all of you, provided that within the time available, you can say whatever you want to say, but be polite. And that was when I heard certain things that I didn't know about. I heard such terminology, hot step and jump, dangerous overtaking. So what does this mean? Again. Okay, so how do we then address this? We harnessed all the things that came up from this town hall meeting. But then said, to address this, because there was now stagnation, morale was very low. And training had not taken place many years. And even if you trained anyone, it was for welfare. And we selected those. So we then decided that we would have a meeting of retired PAMSECs and serving PAMSECs. And of course, when we were finalizing, our former president was also there to raise the question. And what I did at the time, I knew that the 8-year tenure policy was going to be a tough sell. But I also know what the provision of the Constitution says, gives the power to the Federal Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission chairman, and I think one of his commissioners, attended the workshop. So at that workshop, at the end, I got someone to draft the communique, someone who would be against what we recommended. He drafted it, and then he took it to the president. God bless him, he was a good man. He was a good man. We took it to him, he approved it. One may say, how did the 8-year thing come in? It didn't just fall from the blues. You find that the Federal Civil Service Commission already programmed career progression. 3 years up to 13, 24, 14 is 4 years. So by the time you become deputy director, you would have put in minimum of 27 years, other things being equal. And like you put out earlier on, you retire at 60 or 35 years length of service, whichever is earlier. So when you add 8 years to 27, it gives you 35. So when this came up, that was when some people came and said to me, oh, you voted in error. How? So you find that people who were well trained were now stagnating. Those that were on top were not that competent. It affected both North and South. However, with that, when they approved it, to implement it then became a challenge, because then there was someone who was the PAMSEC established. Because to do that anyway, we needed to bring it into the public service rules and to gazette it as well. I won't go into what transpired, but it was virtually gazetted, put in the public service rules, and then of course, that was August of that year. Something then happened. You know that towards the end of the year, I don't know whether it happens here, that is when many ministries would want to finish whatever God did. I can confirm I never did that. I can confirm. So I then said to the president, you know, these people that have spent 8 years, they have to go. Some of my, when I say colleagues, I'm not talking about permanent secretaries. Said, no, let it start from those we are going to appoint. I said, no, it cannot be. Then if we're going to do that, it means that the vacancies that we want to bring up will not come up. So I said, what do I do in this circumstance? I went to the president. I said, we're going into September. The last quarter is coming. Liabilities will be set up for us, even if they don't have the budget, we don't have to pay. Can I do a memo so that this people can go now, or we pay them to December? Why am I saying this? You as permanent secretaries, as advisors, you need to be proactive, pragmatic. You need to bring up these ideas to tell your chief executives so that certain decisions can be approved. When I say what recommendations can be approved. So he said, yes, well, and that was how I wrote the bill. And of course, at that time, the civil service was now dragging its feet. Because for them to go, the Civil Service Commission was dragging. For them to go, because first and foremost, they are civil servants. And of course, when they didn't want to, again I went to my principal, who then summoned the meeting. And that was how they were giving letters. Of course, that is part of the genesis of my travel, but that's fine. So, I'm not going according to, I'm sorry. So, what was the turning point? Okay, I've done the unfavorable. Yes, we did that. Now, as head of service, having been told those things that had brought the low morale, we needed to address them. Training was relegated. So what did we do? With, not myself alone, I had a team, a core team. We prepared or developed modules for all levels. You probably heard when people will say they are alongside university. Maybe you didn't. Because if you didn't go for training, there was no way you could be put up for any promotion exam. And it's not just going for training. You must pass whatever standards they wanted you to meet. I can tell you that in my 16 months as head of service, there was no promotion. Not because there were no people who were fit and proper, but because the Civil Service Commission did not accept the fact that we should present those candidates. Yes, that is the truth of the matter. Because then we had director that is 500,000, director that is this. And I remember going to the then chair saying, look, I hear these stories, but I don't have evidence. But whether it is true or not, let's attack it together. And he said, no, it's not. I said, I'm not saying I have evidence, but this is what they are saying. It's a perception, as far as I'm concerned, but we know it's also true. However, since they did not allow, the head of service, well, you're all here, it is your responsibility to ensure that the people you put forward for promotion examination are fit and proper. And for the Civil Service Commission, yes, the Constitution gives you the mandate to employ, to discipline, but you are not the one to take those people. I want to believe that there will be a portal for making the advertisement, but first and foremost, when it comes to promotion, it is the office of the head of service plus the permanent secretary of the different ministries. You will have to determine your money levels, those ones that are not filled, and say, these are the sort of people we want. So it is one of collaboration. It's not the fact that, oh, the Constitution has given us this power. No. I think it is important that, and this is why whoever is the head of service must have character, must have competence, and must be courageous to take bold decisions. You should not mind whether people will say, are you the only one? I was told that it didn't matter to me. What was important is that there was no self-interest. Now, in doing this, was it smooth? It was not. I think if you look at slide 19, the modules that were prepared for all the different levels, in fact, the training institutions, we just had a situation where virtually on an ongoing basis, they were just training. And I can tell you that before I left, in that 16 months, over 10,000 people had been trained. The MDIs, that's the Management Training Institute, were very busy at the time. It's not a question, the resource that you were given is available for you to do the right things. But despite all of this, there were challenges. And I'll tell you some of them. I think you see this in slide 19. There was this information of genuine intention. That is, deliberately giving information to mislead. And of course, there was fierce resistance to those who were just opposed to it. Skepticism, and then misapplication of rules. IT. In fact, one of them said to me, you have brought in ICT because you do not want certain people. And then there was outright disloyalty. But in all of this, we did what the glory that the then president supported it. I know that those who have come after me have also done their best. But definitely we are not where we are, where we should be. So what am I going to be saying to the permanent secretary? I've said it before. But we must ensure that we are political. This is where I believe we have what we call a social contract between state and citizens. Because today, the number of citizens demanding more from government, and they are becoming more involved. This day of the internet is also clear. So when you have the change, what will happen? Or how will the change come about? Only if you have strong institutions. How do you have strong institutions? By having capable hands, by training and training. So you need all of this. The minister, the permanent secretary, the PAMSEC is actually the administrator managing the day-to-day business. But you must work together. You must work together. Because the budgets that you have, the allocation of the resources, both of you work together before you take it to the Executive Council, before going to the National Assembly. So you have the institutional memory to do all that you need to do. So within this intricate context of multiple accountability, you have to maneuver, you have to apply wisdom. Because you are actually the link, as permanent secretary, the link between politics and administration. Very often, the minister may want to do administrative work. So what do you do when that happens? That question can be asked, talking about it. So, I have said in bullet 3 that the relationship between politicians and bureaucrats is fraught with conflict of self-interest. Sometimes we find that the conflict pertains to the bureaucrats' resistance to political interference and the politicians' endeavor to influence them. The reality is that politics and administration are inextricably linked. So this conflict, in my view, is not really necessary if we all are on the same page. I've quoted something there that John Pierre said. I don't need to read that, it's in a document. But before, I did say when I started that, I want to bring up some of the items that changing political dynamics will bring up. And as permanent secretaries, how do you interpret? I have said permanent secretaries need to be to have capacity. You have to know your workforce. You know, with changing political dynamics, it has its own challenges, also has its own opportunities. But in all of this, it is what you make out of it. I did say you should also assume yourself to be at the federal level. There could be the issue of globalization, for example. How do you balance globalization with nationalism? That would come. You could be at a conference representing either your state. What do you say to that? So really you have to strike a balance between global cooperation and national interests. In the areas of, say, trade, immigration, and economic or environmental policies. What about if there are rapid shifts in policy? A new government comes in. We know that civil servants are loyal to the administration in power. They will tell them the truth. So when a new one comes in and wants to do something that is not whatever it is, what do you do? This is why you must be impartial. You don't take sides. Say it the way it is. Maintain neutrality while effectively implementing government policies. Of course, just like I always say that federal character, there is nothing wrong with federal character. It is how it is implemented. That is where the problem lies. So as it relates to the state, we also have the different zones. So how do you ensure that everybody is catered for? So that is important. There could also be technological disruption. It's important that we are able to adapt to new technologies to improve government efficiency. The question would be, how do you protect data you have to take? Unfortunately, today we do not have a robust cyber state, you should know how to do that. Even when we talk about e-governance, there are different levels. People need not see what they don't have to see. Okay, earlier on we were talking about we push paper from this to that to that. Yes, it's for training, but it can also be done in e-governance. Okay, maybe whilst I'm on this point, I will just say this here. You know, sometimes the minister or the commissioner may just decide to call somebody below the permanent secretary. You may be angry, but you don't need to be angry. But when the staff is returning it, it can give an advance copy to the commissioner or minister, but they want to be acted upon. It must come through the permanent secretary. So you don't need to be angry. So, even in e-governance, send it, but when you are coming back, it's only an advance copy you are sending to the commissioner. The one that will be added on file is coming through the website. So I think that is one quick way. Okay, maybe whilst I'm here on this point, and also say this, you know, maybe I don't know whether it happens in the state where they bring essays from outside. There is no policy that recognizes that. And I think this falls within the purview of the head of the civil service to reach out to his or her principal as governor or president, and a service-wide circular will be issued. You don't comply with any of such papers from them. The reason is simple. They create parallel files. When the commissioner or minister leaves, there is no record. But remember that you as accounting officer, even when you have retired, will record. So I think I've cleared that already. There is also economic uncertainty. We have but where the resources, if our resources are not limited, however, when it becomes a problem, what you need to manage. What about public expectation? How do you do that? How you engage is important. So there must be stakeholder participation. How do you can, these days of internet, you can do virtual, it doesn't have to be physical. But it is important that citizens get to know what you are doing. So, I think I've said virtually all. Now, what are other areas of conflict that may arise between the two offices? We're not talking about PAMSEC commission. We'll find sometimes that harmony is lacking. Why should it be so when we want to deliver common good? We should examine ourselves. But like I said, sometimes it's because the minister or the commissioner thinks that the permanent secretary, because he's an accounting officer, he doesn't want him or her to have influence and therefore just wants to destroy them. But it is not so. So it's important. I recall, yes, I think the first thing I did as head of service really was to prepare a memo which was presented in council, the do's and don'ts. Perhaps you should, the administration is coming to an end. But I believe that is important. When people are coming in, they need to know where their limits of authority lies. There was the non-adherence to financial regulation. They want to interfere with establishment issues. And channels of communication have alluded to that. Okay, rules of assistance, procurement. There was also information hoarding. So I say that given that governance is at the heart of your objectives as public and civil servants. The permanent secretary, as accounting officers, must show leadership by exhibiting courage, discipline, and inclusiveness. We must do that. So how do we prepare for the future? What will drive reforms in our respective states? I would say a well-equipped, responsive, and productive public service staffed, I've said it before, by competent, motivated, and adequately rewarded staff is the bedrock of an effective civil service and reforms. And who are those who should be driving? The governor, the deputies, the permanent secretaries, who are all to drive the change. In doing this, capacity building remains an integral part of your reform initiative. You have to continue to upscale the training that you give to your staff. So as you return to the different states, I urge you to focus on improving, if you have not already started, improving the capacity of the workforce. And you must also have a reward system. You must have a way of punishing bad behavior. We have enough rules, but also reward good behavior. So as we advance, we must search. I don't know how many of the states have performance management system. It is important. If you don't have one, I would suggest that you pilot one, fine-tune it, and roll it out within your different states. It's going to be beneficial, and you must revisit it for currency, that it is up to date and delivering what you want to enable you to measure your delivery. The gaps in ICT, we must initiate mechanisms to address all of this. There must also be internal and external communication, and measure your objectives from time to time to know that where you are lacking, why are we lacking, we review it so that you have to have adjustment. So this is how you manage the change to enhance understanding roles and responsibilities. I have said it before, I'm just repeating it, you need to really build a vital and competent workforce that can drive reforms. You must pay serious attention to progression, again, training, human resource management as a platform for developing all civil servants. We know that the success of government worldwide that have successfully reformed evidences the necessity of a coordinated efforts to reform management. For you find that such environments they transit from vision to reality. So we must do that. And then from my own experience, I realized that for technocracy is important for solving establishment issues. However, it is not all the time. You have to own it together. Don't insist that, oh, because I'm the administrator, I'm in charge of the administration. No. You need to understand that wisdom is. So while we put in our best, we say this all the time in Nigeria, God is not going to come down. While we put in our best, we must conduct ourselves with the fear of the Almighty and invite Him to prosper our endeavors. There is need for permanent secretaries, even the head of service, to be very courageous however daunting the challenge may be. We need to prioritize and set realistic targets or expectations. We need to understand the difference between reform and development. We must have a proper platform to drive your reform. So for the civil service to thrive in your respective states, the governor, the deputy governor, the permanent secretary, all of you need to be on the same page. You must have shared vision to deliver government. So as we go back, I wish all of you, the great government and the good people of the states, successful and sustainable reform.
Like I mentioned, when we came back after the break, that we should be in was something great and special. And I did not, and you could see that that came to pass. Awesome session. Thank you so much, sir. We have really learned a lot. And this is the session where we get to ask questions. This is the point where we get to ask questions concerning what we had this afternoon from this particular session. So, people have questions in the house. This is the time for us to begin this session. There's one hand there.
My name is Victor Okenini. I'd like to thank the former head of the Civil Service Organization for this well-researched paper. I have two questions. Yesterday, when Professor Olakba was delivering his paper, he criticized the use of undirected. I would like to know what is wrong with that statement and whether we should stop using it henceforth in the civil service. Secondly, I want to find out whether the dodgy and floating civil service reform reports are still relevant to today's present civil service. Thank you. I want to know if the dodgy and the floating civil service reform report is still relevant to the civil service as of today.
Next question, so we'll take all the questions and then answer. Okay, so number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. Okay, we have 6 questions and a comment. Okay, so let's 6 questions and a comment. Okay, so let's start. Number 2.
I am Barrister P.S. Bishop, Permanent Secretary, Cross River State Ministry of Establishments, Training and Pensions. But I'm representing my head of service, Dr. Innocent Eden, who is in this post. I thank the former head of service so profusely for that delivery, sir. I was liaising with the technical department here. They said your work will be sent to us. through our email. Sir, I want to ask a question. You said, yes, which is true, the Permanent Secretary is critical and in balancing policies and administrations to achieve excellent governance. Sir, we also hear that the Permanent Secretary is a QSI or pseudo position. That is why not every director, especially those who are qualified, eventually becomes Permanent Secretaries. So, sir, though the president or the governor, as the case may be, has any absolute right without any procedures in appointing his permanent secretaries, because just like in the military, when you get to the rank of a colonel to become a general, it's like an appointment. So I want some clarification in this area. Thank you.
I am Deborah Inokimio, Permanent Secretary, Office of the SSG, Edo State. Sir, considering our varied cultural leanings and the political orientation of the various states, do you think it is feasible to run a unified standard civil service for all the different states of the nation? If yes, how? If no, why?
Permit me to stand on existing protocol. My name is Robert Godwin Osaiho, Director Shared Services, Central Internal Audit Agency. I want to thank Dr. Orsai CFR for this wonderful lecture. It's taking us down the memory lane. Many of us are witnesses to these things. Now, we're concerned about the future of the civil service. And the truth is that the political interference has actually spoiled a lot of things. I want to ask this question, that the area of audit, as it affects monitoring of activities, how do we link this to the questions you asked on how do we go forward? I want to make this suggestion to one of the questions you asked, that the mechanism government has to check these things are already available. We have the internal audit, we have the procurement, and it is obvious that the reason why there is always conflict between these two offices, the Commissioner Office and the PS Office, is because of what we simply call the EOO. And when there is no proper monitoring of this thing, that's why there's a clash. If the procurement is allowed to do its work well, and most in the past, audit comes before approval. But now, the internal audit is now a rubber stamp. Whatever you like to spend, pass it for me. Pass it for me. How do we then manage things? So, I want to ask, how do we link this internal audit mechanism with the civil service control? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Please permit me to stand on the already established protocol. I'm Dr. Mrs. Ewe Rita Samuopa. I want to commend our eloquent speaker. Not just eloquent, he hit the nail on the head. Dr. Steve Lawrence and CFRO. Thank you, sir, for that eye-opening lecture. It was mind-blowing. But then, we tend to learn from people's experiences much easily than, when it's a lot of talk. You said something about some travails that you had, and you just gently push it aside. Please, sir, can we briefly hear some of those challenges? You can never tell which of us, one or two persons that are passing through such challenges, I want to know how you were able to overcome. You've had it, you saw, you came, you overcame, and we too want to learn from your past experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I'll say our mentor, the one we're looking forward to copying and being like him when we get to his age. My name is Glory Odu-Oji. I'm actually Director of Administration, Cross River State Ministry of Commerce. I have two concerns or questions, one having to do with, sir, you did advise that if a chief executive chooses to give instruction to your subordinates class, and that the permanent secretary should be provided on return, the document passes through the permanent secretary. My question is, what if it doesn't pass through the permanent secretary on its way back? So, then my second concern, sir, is the civil service is said to be the engine room of service and governance, rightly so. Sir, but an engine has a maintainer, it has a driver, and so what if those things that are supposed to make the engine function more effectively are not in place? Talking in terms of the overbearing influence of the political class on the civil service rules and regulations are not, since they are chief executive, they override, and whatever the chief executive says stands sacrosanct. How do we reconcile it in ensuring that we maintain the values, the dignity of service? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uncle Steve Oronzaye, for what was a very brilliant presentation. My question is still around institutional memory loss, because that's something that I'm quite passionate about. You mentioned in your presentation that special assistance and how we could suffer memory loss of that. But I perhaps argue that it might be difficult to completely eradicate them. I think it's rather unlikely. So now that we are in this situation, similar to consultants, could we perhaps explore possible policies, etc.? What can we do? Because again, a new politician will come with his own ideas. So how do we ensure that we prevent institutional memory loss? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your paper that has just been well delivered, and the experiences that you've shared also, especially when you were talking about conflict, is that the permanent secretary must have the wisdom to act as the link between the politics and the administration. My question is, what is the border of this wisdom? Do we insist, if we insist on doing the right thing, and we quote the regulations and the rule, is that wisdom? If we turn a blind eye and behave as if we don't know what our chief executive is trying to do, is that also wisdom? If we become complacent altogether and just allow him to do whatever he wants to do, is that also wisdom? So what exactly, sir, did you mean when you said we should have wisdom to know how to link between the politics and the administration?
My name is Ibeki Bingapogo, Permanent Secretary, Environmental Sanitation Authority, Bayelsa State. My question goes like this. We often hear of people say some public forum, retired but not tired. Now, everything is dynamic. Things change year in, year out. But I observe that the civil service, public service rule with regards to retirement, age, and service is permanent. For years, it has been 60 years age and 35 years of service. Now, this person retired, the student appear very young, and the next minute, they are turned back to serve. Doctor, my question is, in your own opinion, is it still feasible? The retirement age of the civil servant should remain at 60 and the service at 35. Is it still feasible? Considering the changing times of the time, or considering the nature of the changing that takes place in the service? Thank you.
Thank you. My question is very simple. Right? So my name is Isaac Ibiwede again. So two things I want to talk about. From yesterday to today, we've heard about permanent secretaries coming from outside and even encourage public servants to go to serve in private sector, then return as permanent secretaries. Now, we heard about the tenure issue that Dr. Ronsaye mentioned. So the question I have is this. If I brought in permanent secretaries from the private sector, at what point would they exit the service? Would they exit with the appointed administration, or would they stay beyond that administration? If they have not spent, if they are younger than 60 and have not spent 35 years in service. Thank you.
The former head of service of Federation, One House, it's always a privilege to listen to you. I'm very glad, sir, I had an opportunity to sit in here and listen to you again, particularly after that first lecture you delivered when we inaugurated this house. The wisdom that came forth when you spoke is something that cannot buy you out. So I want to thank you, sir. A lot of questions have been raised. I will just make one comment with particular reference to the question of what wisdom means. I will just say something. Those days when I was in the Ministry of Justice, I'm sure my colleague here also says, we had a boss, it was Scandal, who told us a story. And apparently she had also heard this story. It was quite instructive. And if your boss tells you that the way to get downstairs from here is to jump through the window, you advise him that, sir, these are the consequences. You break your leg. So if he insists that that's the best, what you will do is to quickly run through the staircase. You don't jump out like you want. Run through the staircase, look for foam. Put it where, measure it, where he will land if he jumps through the window, so that when he jumps, they will not break his leg. I don't know that practice to what our guy is going to say. I just thought I should mention that. Then the other issue, okay, sorry, sir. Forgive me, sir. The other issue about I am directed. My personal opinion is I am directed can never leave service. Because in reality, and layers of authority, no matter how innovative you may be, you have to be instructed to do certain things. What is wrong with I am directed is the use to which we put it. So it is not intrinsically wrong. It is when you become bereft of ideas, when you become someone who is a zombie, I mean, it gets into your work. That's when undirected becomes the problem. So again, that brings us to what the guy is going to say. And finally, finally, in addition to the things Oga has said concerning what you should do as permanent secretary and what you shouldn't do as permanent secretary, I think we need to read that working so that we can learn a lot more lessons. One of the things experience has also shown me is that sometimes when you try to outshine your boss, you get into problems with your boss. So as a civil servant, when you're working for your boss, as a lawyer I understand that. I've done a lot of Supreme Court authority, a lot of Supreme Court work that my name never appeared. The reason is that I was working for a boss who took the glory and all that. But now, people are also working for me. So if you do for others, for you. So you understand that you have to not, you must make effort to not outshine your boss. Your business is to advise him, he takes the glory. And that you must ensure that you do. So if you don't, you'll find a lot of areas where you have conflict. I just thought I should check that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting questions. The one about undirected. Can someone tell me where undirected is in the public service rules? However, I am directed, just like you said, will never end. However, what will be your comment on your way? So for me, that is the response. So you must have what you need to put down. You must have capacity to say, this is my own advice. So undirected will remain, and in fact, the minister will say, deal. Deal is not an approval. Deal is not an approval. Process is not an approval. So what do you understand by deal or process? It's still going to go up for approval. But now, let me now say this. Where funds are involved, because we are talking about applying wisdom, the funds are involved, and an audit now takes place. Who will be held accountable? Not the minister, not the commissioner, it is the permanent secretary. When I say apply wisdom, you will know how to navigate the intricacies. Where funding is concerned, I will not bend. I can also tell you, okay, if I tell you, then you know the minister I'm referring to. However, the truth of the matter, you must be humble. You cannot outshine your boss. Let him take all the glory. But when your boss insists that you must do certain things that is against the rule, I will do that. And of course, I didn't do it. I escalated it to the president, and that caused the minister his job. So for me, you need to have capacity, you need to have courage. So I guess I've answered the one of directed and wisdom. Udoji report is still very relevant. The only thing that was implemented was the salary. What happened to the other recommendations? So I've answered the very first one. The second one had to do with the president appointing a permanent secretary from one side. What is the provision of the Constitution? I don't want to be talking about myself. I do know that after I retired, civil servants came to me to say, what about this? What about this? And I said, I didn't leave anything in the office. whoever is the head of service has a responsibility to bring it to the attention of his principal. That is the only thing you need to do. After that, you don't do it. The question is, have you done what was expected of you? The third one had to do with the Civil Service Commission, whether the states, for goodness sake. The Constitution provides for Civil Service Commission for every state. When I started talking, I said what we need to do in the praised state is that of collaboration. So you can always come together to think. Remember when I said public service rules as adopted? I was careful to say as adopted. I didn't want to assume that you have accepted all that thing. However, there is a council of establishment where heads of service and council establishment there, I think you say only your annual meeting. So that is where issues are discussed. And when you agree, it comes back and each state it will go to council. Once it's approved, you make an amendment to whatever rules that you're using. So it is that of collaboration. It's not for you to have a single one because it's a constitutional requirement. Political interference. Okay, I talked about audit. The rules are very clear. What is there is that people don't have character. So if you say, oh, just leave it, why would you? It's because you yourself as auditor are benefiting from it. So the rules are clear. Just comply with the rules. The fifth person, we were discussing it. Okay, you wanted to know what my child.
What are your challenges?
I was in court for 8 years. To God be the kingdom. I was vindicated. They had 42 charges. 42. And not a single one could be proven against me. Okay, I've answered the it was question that I talked about the Civil Service Commission. I've answered that. Okay, institutional law. That's the issue. Well, put it this way. Nothing will be lost if you follow the rules. It is just that you can also come up with guidelines. In fact, there are guidelines. Is that they are not allowed to mint on official files. There will be a line director, there will be a line deputy director. They should work with this people. So there is no way memory will be lost. Let them do what is right. So we don't need to change it. That's the truth of it. I've also talked about wisdom, how to apply wisdom. Which is your own. Okay, that's right. You see, again, I said, don't be angry. Why do you want to be angry? The most important thing, okay, in applying wisdom, what sort of instruction was passed down? Would it involve spending money? And how much, for example? If it involves spending money on contracts, obviously you know that you know. Because you cannot spend a penny without a concept. But if it is a mundane thing that you can overlook certain things. However, when you are returning it, for goodness sake, unless you yourself, you are part of whatever deal it is, there's nothing stopping you from passing through the numbers. That would be it still doesn't matter. Does it involve payment of funds? If he does, he must go to the pump set. There is nothing you can do. You teach them. There is nothing you can do. It's for them to accept. If they don't accept, there is nothing. You can also educate the chief executive in humility. Say, this is what the group says. But if he or she decides not to follow, there is nothing. It's not a big deal. Yes, but the point of if it is still on, you know, I have said the head of service has a responsibility to approach his principal. If need be, do again a service-wide circular, bringing this to their attention, so that they know they prefer ignorance. And it may be real, it may not be real. But once that circular is there, get the backing of the principal.
I think she just spoke the mind of Biden. Well, I wanted to ask if this is okay, so you can also guide us. Thank you. What I always tell them is that if there's a bad person by the municipal head, then you go to the head and insist on what it is. Sometimes that happens. Now, put it because you never get it can be, no, the point I'm making is that it can become that thing that you're writing down.
That thing can also be
It's also possible. But again, it's always better to protect yourself if you're not sure. Put things in writing. In fact, I encourage everyone, even when you have had a verbal conversation with your boss, this is what we learned those days. But I don't see that done anymore. When you have had a verbal conversation with your boss, when you go back, put it in writing to him. This is what we discussed. Then give for that.
Another thing, you have actually said that, in fact, usually, I think there were 2 or 3 times when there was a verbal discussion I had with the recently. An approval was given. All I did was to say, is that the court confirmed that this is. And that was it. The approval was tonight.
A round of applause, please, for this question and answer session. Dr. Abba has a few comments.
Thank you, Uncle Steve, for very interesting and informative session. I just like to pick up on 3 things quickly. The first is the I am directed issue. When I was in government, I never had any problem with directed, but you must tell me who directed you. So I always write back to say, kindly clarify who directed you, because I found that in a number of cases, nobody directed me. Particularly when it's to do with expenditure, you must tell me the person that directed you. So, just to be on the safe side on that one. Then on the Udoji reports, I agree completely with Uncle Steve. What I'll tell you is that those of us that are consultants, the things that we are using to eat and make money today in 2014 were recommended by Udoji in 1974, 50 years ago. Udoji recommended management by objectives. He recommended performance-based budgeting. He recommended salary review, because if you look at, if you're a public servant, you have a rare privilege that you're exercising the power of the state, right? Not many people get that privilege. You don't actually know how big a deal it is, that you're actually exercising the authority of your country. So because of that, Udoji reasoned that that privilege must be worth something. And don't forget that at the time of independence, the brightest people came to the public service. Anybody that went to Shell or Mobil are those who not at the top of the class, the top of their classes. So, but as the 70s started, people, the service started to lose some of the brightest to the public sector. And Udoji reasoned that, okay, you need to bring the salary closer to the public sector, to the private sector, so that if somebody is earning 100 naira a share, if you at least earn 70 naira, then the privilege of exercising state power will make up for the other 30%. And so he said, we can't continue to pay people peanuts and expect to get the brightest and the best. So he said, reform salaries, but don't do it all at once. Phase it in so that the system gets used to the increments. What the government of the day did was to abandon all of those recommendations, did the salary increase, did it in one go, and caused inflation. So, but the answer to the question is yes. The Udoji report is still very, very relevant today, and many of us are still using it to eat. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Myself and my former head of service, we were having this discussion that may be part of some of these questions, was the fact that at the federal level, you probably have more leeway to find a way to go to main number one. Some of us obvious reasons, okay? It probably doesn't exist in the state, following your question. Because we've had instances where, for example, Minister of Foreign Affairs, where the president gave orders. I was not at the meeting because I gave orders that the visit of Hillary Clinton, and I was only told late in the evening. Instantly, I told my minister, no, it will not be cancelled. The next morning, we had a long meeting in frustration. He said to me, you just left the villa, go to the villa and tell the president. I said, yes, I would. And it took us 3 hours to get that decision changed. I'm not too sure such things can happen at the state level. And I'm just trying to point out that I think this is where we are having this conversation, at the federal level, to their credit, all the presidents that I can think of, they're actually very open to listening to complaints from the civil service itself. And they're also very protective of the service. But from my own experience of watching what happens at the state level, I think it's a different ballgame. And I thought that we should bear that in mind. I've always wondered how that can be changed, but I don't have an answer.
Well, thank you very much. What my colleague here has said is also true. I also had an experience where the minister had complained to the president over a permanent secretary, and the president actually approved that this permanent secretary be disciplined. And the approval came to me. I saw it. And this is why I said when I was talking, I said, whatever challenge you have in your ministry, please involve your head of service. So as soon as the president's approval came, no problem. I went straight to the president. And I said, this is an approval I have given. Yes, you have approved. But implementing it means that you are rewarding bad behavior and punishing good behavior. And this is what transpired. I am aware. And the president just dropped his pen. And that was it. And then, so when I was not doing general process, I moved to the minister. So I think it is important that the head of service should have easy access to the government.
Wow. Just wow. Okay. There were two questions, sir, that they said you skipped. Yes, two. Yes, no problem. I'll just take the two questions. One of the questions was, permanent secretaries, are they pseudo or quasi-politicians? And then the next question was, the retirement age of 60 and 35 years of active service, is it still active and relevant or visible for today?
I said, no. I said there is a council of establishment. Such things are discussed in such a place. It is not for me to say it is relevant. If you think it should be changed, but if you ask my candid view, a country where you have population explosion, where you have youths to employ, do you really want to increase the retirement age? Let me say this to you. When I was head of service, there was pressure on me to raise the retirement age of civil servants. And I was going to retire in November. It was in the lesson. That was the time they were raising the retirement age of research personnel to 65. And I told who was pushing that I will not do it. Not because for me, I would want everyone to have this same uniform retirement age. But a country where you have a great number of youth unemployed, they want to remain in service forever. So the second one.
Permanent secretaries, pseudo or quasi-politicians.
Well, what does the Constitution say? I always go back to the law. What does it say? That was his question. Yes, you see, I'll tell you, to that extent, because the president appoints them, yes. But you know what? If you have not reached the retirement age, by law, you can actually revert to become a director. Is that what you want to do? So it's therefore that
Thank you, sir. On behalf of my colleagues, because we usually have our National Council establishment meetings, usually once every year, even though some of us have made a case that it should be more than once, so we can also do peer review. This issue has come up twice. It came up in Yola, it came up again last in Bochi, and we took the same decision, which is consistent in sync with what Uncle Rosai said today. We cannot. Yes. Okay, no, not Rosai. The decision was very clearly that in a country where there's so many young people that are unemployed, we cannot afford to take that decision. We are not ripe for that decision. So we agreed that the extant situation remains. The only thing that made some people begin to worry was the fact that the issue of the increase in that of teachers, and of course also as judges today, they retire at 70, professors retire at 70, in fact lecturers retire normally at 65, right? But even the non-academic staff of universities retire at 65. So that has been the problem. So, because people say what is good for the good is good for the devil. But how many are these? And I understand that because as a lawyer, I really find it very difficult to imagine that a lawyer who appears before a judge retires at 60, and the judge who takes his cases retires at 70. For me, it doesn't make sense. But that's a small group of people. Because we also know that lawyers, the older you go, the more experience you have. So I train my lawyers when they are 60 and going. But that's a conversation we can have later. But definitely not now. And that's the position of counsel. Counsel has said the position remains 60 years, 35 years, whichever is earlier. Thank you.
The question that I missed, I'm sorry, sir. The question was, permanent secretaries brought in from private sector, at what point do they leave the service? Is it when the governor leaves? Or does the rule of 60 years or 35 years of service applies?
Well, the person that was brought in from outside, is he a civil servant?
Now I think that question was answered in wisdom. Okay, so far you have given me that we've been having a good time. We've been having a good time learning. And next on our list, we're going to take the Brace Commission technical team, their presentation. Are they ready? The Brace Commission technical team presentation. Please, a round of applause for them as they come to the stage for their presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Leveraging the already established protocol, my name is Courage Adage, the Secretary of the Technical Team for the Brace Commission and Head Information Infrastructure Engineer ICT Edo State. This team is ably led by the Chairman from Rivers State, and by way of introduction, Mr. Dinka Austin. And we also have the technical teams from Rivers State, Bayelsa State, Mr. Apoluto, from Delta State, Mr. Rocky, and from Akwa Ibom, Mr. Maris Jack. The team is saddled with one objective: to continue to ensure that technologies that have been active and are already being used in other states can be ensured that other states are able to get them. It is on this premise I invite the chairman of this technical team to give a brief on the directives. Thank you.
We're expecting Percival to join us this evening by reason of nomination. Well, I want to quickly continue from where my teammate in the stopped. My name is actually Austin Diva. I'm the chairman of this Brace Commission technical team. I want to thank, first of all, quickly thank, on behalf of my team members, thank our head of service, specifically and our bank sector, for releasing us to Grace Commission team. We won't take it for granted. Thank you very much, sirs. We have already commenced work after we've been inaugurated in Asaba during the conference of the Commission for Education. We are actually asked to quickly come up with policies that will drive all the various sectors based on ICT. So the policy directive already they are set. We were able to do president to the DG, and just for them to move it off to the various states for adoption. It's a framework. It's actually called Grace Commission Integrated ICT Innovation and Digital Economy Policy Framework. And the policy directive is what you are saying. It has to do with either intellectual property, land property transactions, construction, capacity building, health, investment, urban, just like the civic development, local content, judicial environment. It's a comprehensive policy framework. And what we are not seeing here, or we are seeing here, is the fiber optics right-of-way framework, which is one of the pretty parts that we want the head of service or the government, if you have not adopted, to quickly get into it. Because I know there's already money you get at the end of this year, you get involved or you are listed. It's just by reason of adopting the fiber optics right-of-way framework. There's already World Bank sent it to us, we have demonstrated it. The states can quickly adopt it by way of executive order, which is more easier, or through legislation. But I can tell you, if you start immediately, as I'm talking to you now, at the end of this year, the state will be entitled to $2 million. If you double your right-of-way acquisition by next year, the state will get $4 million. What we're also pushing as a team, specifically, we are like a driving agent. We have had so much beautiful talk, but what the Grace Commission is doing now, based on what they asked us, the way they have given us orientation, is to help them drive this implementation in the various states. I must confess, Edo is doing very well. I know that about that. I've known that ever since. We all made reference to them when I was the World Bank project. I was the technical head for our integrated financial management implementation in River State. We always referenced Edo State. So I'm told and encouraged that we'll do more of collaboration, not just speaking, we'll do more of collaboration. We'll help to drive that collaboration in our various states. And please, sir, head of Edo State, make sure you stay open to us, please, sir, because we don't have to drive. We'll drive you until we get results. We don't drive and stop. We'll drive until we get results. And that's what the Grace Commission is up to now. We don't want to leave this kind of stage and get into the state and allow them to get involved. Because the truth is this, the donations are there, the monies are there. I was surprised you had $800 million to be shared, not shared, by reason of an involvement of the state. I'll tell my members, do you hear that amount? It's not coming from state government costs. It's not from the fact that they don't have made a choice to embrace some of these things. And what the criteria are very simple. Example, for right-of-way fiber, pass the law by reason of executive order, mine your data, that's those who have given the license, have your official website, upload them on the official website. What bank will say it? They give you $2 million. Very simple. And I want to stop there because there's so much for us to do. I'm not talking so much. My teacher have told us that there's so much for us to do. And we're ready to drive it. Thank you, sir. Okay, in the clarification in these areas that were mentioned here, can ask us. One thing I forgot is the educational sector. They have some current World Bank project going on, and I know Edo State have killed it because they're very smart around that. I know that state have not killed it. My state, I am very they know me very well. My state, smaller states have not killed it. We're here to help other states to gain. And the truth is that as the letter will come from Grace Commission to the various states, will help to drive it to make sure they keep it. The criteria is also very simple. Especially in education, the money is running. The next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your compliments for Edo. I'm wondering, you said something when we were talking about us. You asked me to be open with you. And I'm like, what does being open with you mean? I'm a lawyer. When I draft agreements, I draft them in such a way that those on this side and the other side understand it. So I want to understand what openness means so that I can know how to approach.
Well, we'll be coming to you for advice. Please show us as a team, Brains Commission technical team. Our work is to help drive this in the various states. We'll be coming to say, sir, how do we get this done? That's it. So we'll push it to other states. That's it.
Thank you. I thought I'd just make an intervention on this. This actually originated from the meeting of the Commissioners of Education, Science and Technology in Asana. In the course of the discussion, not only was, and I'll say this again to your credit, that anytime we have this meeting of commissioners on various subjects, they don't seem to protect and tell us what they've done. And this was being discussed at the Commissioners of Education, Science and Technology. And it was realized that we need to accelerate in this region compared to what others are doing, particularly in the Southwest. And we thought that if we did not accelerate, that we probably find ourselves left behind. And this was where the commissioner said, no, we need to come together and develop a policy on ICT, essentially to see how we can drive the process to ensure that in terms of ICT utilization, that this region collectively, because that's the whole essence of the Brains Commission, collectively that we are moving at the same pace. Like I said yesterday, one of my concerns has always been that if you open the newspapers on a daily basis, there are so many things happening in Lagos on ICT, almost on a daily basis. If you are happy in Abuja, when visitors come connected with ICT, where do they stop? They stop in Lagos, they make it stop in Abuja, they go back. It doesn't appear as if the rest of us exist. And why is that so? It's because, number one, of course, some of them still think that the whole region is insecure to start with. But the truth of the matter is that we are not even doing enough to demonstrate that, no, that it's not insecurity. Like the last meeting we had in, no, not to you, this MSC, small, medium, and we went to in Port Harcourt. When I told something that I was going to Port Harcourt, they said, you didn't hear what's going on in Port Harcourt? Are you crazy? And I said, no, there's something happening in Port Harcourt, it's media hype. But that's what people hear, and so they stay in Lagos, they stay in Abuja. But it's our own youth and our people that are losing from this. So we want to use this policy to create that confidence. And also, a lot of resources are being poured in by the World Bank. For example, it was when we were on Zoom meeting that I got a call from Professor Ayara. We were just talking. And he told me, and I said to him, oh, we have this team that we are meeting on ICT something. And he drew my attention to the fact that there are 2 funds from the World Bank, and asked if we were utilizing it. And I asked everybody on the Zoom, are you people are aware of this? Absolutely nobody in the region is aware. We called up commissioners of education, science center, are you aware of this funding spending? Everybody was like, no. And he told me that some northern states have actually assessed their own money for the project. We do not even know, not to talk of, So this is just part of, we now set to put this thing together to say, please, start working on this. But one of those things I would also say that creates that confidence is that we also need to begin to organize a lot of ICT events within our region and states so that people can begin to see that, look, insecurity is really not our problem. The states are relatively safe and we can do a lot of things, but nobody is going to come to do it for us until they see that we are doing it, and then they will support us. And that's the whole essence of this thing. Thank you.
Okay, a round of applause for the technical team. Thank you so much. So, we are gradually coming to the end of today's session, but not the end yet, because we still have something major to do. A quick information for everyone. When we go for the short break for lunch, like you already know, there's hierarchy in civil service. So the heads of service and our special guests will go out first, then the permanent secretaries and the heads of the MDA and the rest of us. But this lunch we're going to have this afternoon, because there's a scheduled tour with this event, and it's majorly for our invited guests. So expect our invited guests to take their lunch first so they can be able to go on that tour before we will not proceed for our lunch. Is that okay? Okay, so at this point, let's rise to take the national anthem. Because after the lunch, we may not be coming back. Remember, tomorrow we continue by 9 a.m. 9 a.m. on the dot we will begin. 9 a.m. on the dot we will begin. Please, let's come 9 a.m. so we can start. I come before 9 a.m. actually, so we can start by 9 a.m. on the dot. Thank you so much.